Sarah Mitchell walked through the crowded hallway of Lincoln High School with her head down, clutching her books tightly against her chest. The familiar knot in her stomach grew tighter with each step. She could hear the whispers and snickers following her like a dark cloud. At 15, Sarah had already learned that being different was a crime in the cruel world of high school social hierarchy. Her thick glasses, secondhand clothes, and quiet nature made her an easy target. What made it worse was her father's absence. While other kids bragged about their parents' jobs or weekend plans, Sarah remained silent about her family. Her classmates didn't know that her father, Commander James Mitchell, was deployed overseas with the Navy SEALs. They didn't know about the sleepless nights she spent worrying about his safety, or how her mother worked double shifts at the hospital just to keep their small apartment. The main tormentors were a group led by Tyler Brooks, the quarterback's younger brother, who felt he had a reputation to maintain. Alongside him were Marcus Chun, whose parents' wealth had bought him popularity, and Jessica Williams, whose sharp tongue could cut deeper than any blade. They had made Sarah's life miserable for the past 2 years, and today felt no different. As Sarah approached her locker, she noticed the familiar setup. Tyler and his friends were positioned strategically near her locker, pretending to have casual conversations while waiting for her arrival. Her heart raced, but she had no choice. She needed her chemistry textbook for the next class. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, Tyler called out as Sarah reached her locker. His voice carried that false friendliness that always preceded something cruel. Sarah fumbled with her combination lock, her hands trembling slightly. She had memorized the numbers long ago, but under pressure, even simple tasks became difficult. Behind her, she could feel the eyes of other students watching, some with sympathy, others with the morbid curiosity that comes with witnessing someone else's humiliation. "Did you forget how to open a locker, freak?" Marcus chimed in, stepping closer. "Maybe your brain is as broken as your clothes." Jessica laughed, a sound that always made Sarah's skin crawl. "Look at those shoes. Are those from the thrift store's clearance section?" The comments weren't new, but they still stung. Sarah finally got her locker open and quickly reached for her textbook. She just wanted to grab it and leave, to disappear into the crowd and make it to her next class without further incident. But Tyler had other plans. As Sarah pulled out her chemistry book, Tyler deliberately bumped into her, causing the book to fall from her hands and scatter her loose papers across the hallway floor. Students walking by either stepped around the mess, or worse, stepped on her homework assignments. "Oops," Tyler said with a smirk. "Sorry about that. You should really be more careful." Sarah knelt down to collect her papers, her face burning with embarrassment. Some of her homework was now dirty with shoe prints, and she watched helplessly as one of her carefully written essays was torn when someone accidentally stepped on it. The chemistry textbook had fallen open, and several pages were bent. "Need help?" Jessica asked in a mockingly sweet voice. But instead of helping, she accidentally kicked one of Sarah's notebooks further away. "Oh no, I'm so clumsy today." The gathering crowd was growing, and Sarah could hear more whispers and giggles. Some students pulled out their phones, and Sarah's heart sank as she realized this humiliation might be recorded and shared on social media. The thought of her embarrassment being broadcasted to the entire school made her stomach turn. Marcus picked up one of her papers and pretended to read it. "What's this? A love letter? Who would ever want to date you?" He held it high above Sarah's reach as she stood up, trying to get it back. "Please give it back," Sarah said quietly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the hallway. "What was that?" "Speak up, Mouse," Tyler said, cupping his ear dramatically. "We can't hear you." "Please give me my paper back," Sarah repeated, louder this time. "That's better," Marcus said, but instead of returning it, he tossed it to Jessica, who caught it and immediately crumpled it into a ball. "Oops," Jessica said, dropping the crumpled paper at Sarah's feet. "Butterfingers." Sarah bent down again to pick up the ruined paper, fighting back tears. She had spent hours working on that assignment, and now it was destroyed. As she knelt on the floor, Tyler stepped closer, deliberately blocking her path when she tried to stand up. "You know what your problem is?" Tyler said, his voice taking on a nastier edge. "You think you're better than everyone else with your perfect grades and your teacher's pet act. But look at you. You're nothing. Your family is nothing. No wonder your dad ran away to join the military. He probably couldn't stand being around you." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Her father hadn't run away. He was serving his country, risking his life for people like Tyler who would never understand sacrifice or honor. But she couldn't say that. She couldn't defend him without revealing information that might somehow be used against her later. "Maybe if you tried harder to fit in, people might actually like you," Jessica added. "But who are we kidding? Some people are just born losers." The circle of students watching had grown larger, and Sarah felt trapped. She clutched her remaining books and papers to her chest, looking for an escape route. But Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica had positioned themselves to block her in. "Where do you think you're going?" Marcus asked as Sarah tried to move around him. "We're just trying to have a friendly conversation." Sarah's eyes darted around, looking for a teacher or any adult who might intervene. But the hallway was filled only with students, and none of them seemed inclined to help. Some looked uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, but nobody stepped forward. The bullying had escalated gradually over the past 2 years. It started with small comments and exclusion from group activities. Then it progressed to more direct insults and occasional physical harassment like bumping into her or knocking things out of her hands. Recently, it had become more systematic and cruel, as if the three bullies fed off each other's energy and pushed each other to be meaner. Sarah had tried various strategies to deal with it. She had attempted to ignore them, hoping they would get bored and move on to other targets. She had tried changing her route through the school, but they seemed to always find her. She had even tried reporting it to teachers, but the bullies were clever about doing it when adults weren't around, and without witnesses willing to speak up, it became a matter of her word against theirs. The worst part was the isolation. Sarah had friends in her advanced classes, but they were in different social circles and different lunch periods. During the times when she was most vulnerable, like passing through the main hallways between classes, she was usually alone and easy to target. Her mother knew something was wrong. Sarah had become more withdrawn at home, and her appetite had decreased. She jumped at unexpected sounds and seemed constantly anxious. When her mother asked about school, Sarah always said everything was fine. She didn't want to add to her mother's stress when she was already working so hard to support them while her father was deployed. Sometimes Sarah wondered what her father would think if he knew what was happening. Commander James Mitchell was known for his calm under pressure and his ability to handle any situation. He had trained for years to face the most dangerous enemies, but his daughter was facing her own war every day at school, and he wasn't there to protect her. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that her father was fighting to protect freedom and justice overseas while she felt helpless against 3 teenagers in a high school hallway. She knew her father would want her to stand up for herself, but she also knew he would want her to be smart about it. Fighting back physically would only make things worse and could get her suspended. Tyler stepped even closer, invading her personal space in a way that made her extremely uncomfortable. "You know what? I think you need to learn some manners. Maybe if you got down on your hands and knees and apologized for being such a freak, we might consider leaving you alone." The suggestion was designed to be humiliating, and Sarah could see in Tyler's eyes that he expected her to comply. The crowd around them had grown even larger, and she could hear phones being pulled out as people anticipated what might happen next. Sarah's hands were shaking now, partly from fear and partly from anger. She thought about her father's letters where he wrote about honor and standing up for what was right. She thought about her mother's strength in handling everything alone. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep because of these same 3 people. "No," Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. Tyler's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Excuse me? Did you just say no to me?" "I said no," Sarah repeated, louder this time. "I'm not apologizing for anything. I haven't done anything wrong. The crowd around them seemed to sense that something was shifting. The energy in the hallway changed from anticipation of easy humiliation to curiosity about what would happen next. Marcus stepped forward, clearly annoyed that their usual intimidation tactics weren't working as expected. "You're making a mistake, freak. You really want to do this the hard way." Jessica pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going to be good." The mouse finally tries to roar. But as the confrontation reached its peak, as Tyler raised his hand, as if to shove Sarah against the lockers, as the crowd pressed closer to get a better view, none of them noticed the tall figure in military dress uniform who had just entered the school's main hallway. Commander James Mitchell had returned from deployment a day early, planning to surprise his daughter at school. He had coordinated with the school office to sign out Sarah for an early dismissal so they could spend the afternoon together before his official homecoming. He had been looking forward to seeing her face light up when she realized he was home safe. Instead, as he walked down the hallway following the directions to Sarah's locker, he began to hear raised voices and see a crowd gathered. Something in his gut told him to investigate. And as he got closer, he began to pick up fragments of conversation that made his blood run cold. When he finally pushed through the crowd of students and saw his daughter cornered against the lockers by 3 older teenagers, when he heard the cruel words being directed at her, when he saw the fear and humiliation in her eyes, something primal and dangerous awakened in him. The highly trained Navy SEAL who had faced enemy combatants in some of the world's most dangerous places was about to encounter a threat that made him angrier than he had ever been in his entire military career. These weren't enemy soldiers or terrorists. These were children who had made his daughter's life a living hell, and they had no idea that they had just crossed a line that should never be crossed. The storm that was about to break would change everything for Sarah, for her tormentors, and for everyone who witnessed what happened when a father's protective instincts merged with the skills and intensity of one of the military's most elite warriors. Commander James Mitchell stood at the edge of the crowd, his trained eyes rapidly assessing the situation before him. Years of military experience had taught him to gather intelligence quickly and thoroughly before taking action. What he observed made his jaw clench with barely controlled fury. His daughter Sarah was pressed back against the lockers, surrounded by 3 teenagers who were clearly older and larger than her. Her body language screamed distress. Hunched shoulders, downcast eyes, trembling hands clutching her books like a shield. Papers were scattered on the floor around her feet, some torn and dirty with shoe prints. The crowd of students watching formed a loose circle, some recording with phones, others just gawking at the entertainment. But it was the words he heard that transformed his anger from simmer to a roiling boil. "Maybe your dad ran away because he couldn't stand you," one of the boys was saying. "No wonder he joined the military, just to get away from his freak daughter." James felt his hands clench into fists involuntarily. These children had no idea what military service meant, what sacrifice looked like, or what it cost families like his. They were using his absence, his service to his country, as ammunition to hurt his child. He forced himself to remain still and continue observing. The boy who seemed to be the leader was tall for his age, probably 16 or 17, with an athletic build and the kind of confident posture that came from never having faced real consequences. The Asian boy beside him was smaller, but had a cruel smile that suggested he enjoyed others' pain. The girl recording with her phone had perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes, and her expression showed the detached amusement of someone who saw others suffering as entertainment. Sarah tried to move away from the lockers, but the lead boy stepped closer, deliberately invading her personal space. James recognized the intimidation tactic immediately, using physical proximity to make someone feel trapped and helpless. It was a form of psychological warfare, and seeing it used against his 15-year-old daughter made his protective instincts surge like a tsunami. "Where do you think you're going?" the boy said to Sarah. "We're not done talking to you yet." James began moving through the crowd, his military bearing causing students to unconsciously step aside even before they realized who he was. He moved with the silent efficiency of someone trained in stealth operations, getting closer without drawing attention to himself. "Please just leave me alone," Sarah said, her voice small but trying to be firm. "I haven't done anything to you." The girl with the phone laughed. "Existing is doing something to us. You make this whole school look bad just by being here." "Yeah," the smaller boy chimed in. "Maybe if you transferred to another school, everyone here would be happier." James was now close enough to see the tears threatening to spill from his daughter's eyes. Sarah was fighting to maintain her composure, but he could see the toll this was taking on her. How long had this been going on? How many times had she endured this kind of treatment while he was overseas, unable to protect her? The lead boy reached out as if to shove Sarah, and that's when James decided he had seen enough. "Is there a problem here?" His voice cut through the chatter of the crowd like a blade. Deep, commanding, and carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The crowd of students immediately began to turn, and a ripple of whispers spread as they saw the tall man in military dress uniform standing behind them. The three bullies turned as well, and James watched their expressions change as they took in his appearance. Commander James Mitchell was an imposing figure even without the uniform. At 6 feet 3 inches with broad shoulders and the kind of physical fitness that came from years of elite military training, he commanded attention. But in his navy dress blues, with his ribbons and decorations clearly visible, he looked like exactly what he was, a highly trained warrior who had seen real combat and real danger. Sarah's eyes widened as she saw her father, a mixture of shock, relief, and embarrassment flooding her features. "Dad?" she whispered, unable to believe he was actually there. The lead bully, Tyler, tried to recover his composure quickly. "Ball? No, sir. No problem. We were just talking to Sarah here." James's eyes fixed on Tyler with the kind of stare that had made enemy combatants reconsider their life choices. "Talking," he repeated, his tone suggesting he found the characterization interesting. "Is that what we're calling it?" The crowd of students had grown silent, sensing the shift in dynamics. Many of them had never seen a real military officer up close, and James's presence seemed to fill the hallway. Some began to back away, instinctively recognizing that they were witnessing something serious. Marcus, the smaller boy, tried to step slightly behind Tyler, suddenly looking much younger than he had moments before. Jessica had stopped recording and was holding her phone at her side, looking uncertain for the first time. "Yes, sir," Tyler said, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. "Just a friendly conversation." James looked down at the scattered papers on the floor, at the torn homework assignment, at the way his daughter was still pressed back against the lockers as if trying to disappear. "Friendly," he said, nodding slowly. "I see." He looked back at Tyler, and when he spoke, his voice carried the quiet intensity that his fellow SEALs knew meant serious business. "Son, I've been standing here for several minutes watching this friendly conversation, and I have to say it doesn't look very friendly to me." Tyler's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed nervously. We didn't." "You didn't what?" James asked, taking a step closer. He wasn't trying to intimidate the boy physically, but his presence alone was enough to make Tyler shrink back. "You didn't corner my daughter against these lockers? You didn't knock her things to the floor? You didn't insult her and her family?" The word daughter hit the three bullies like a physical blow. The realization that this imposing military officer was Sarah's father, the father they had been mocking, changed everything. James could see the fear creeping into their eyes as they began to understand the magnitude of their mistake. "You your daughter?" Jessica managed to stammer. "That's right," James said, his gaze shifting to include all three of them. "Sarah is my daughter, and I just flew halfway around the world after serving my country for 8 months, looking forward to seeing her, only to find her being harassed by 3 cowards who think it's entertaining to pick on someone smaller than them." The crowd of watching students was completely silent now. Some had pulled out phones to record this new development, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Tyler tried to salvage the situation. "Sir, we didn't mean anything by it. We were just joking around. Right, Sarah? Tell him we were just joking. James's eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. Don't you dare try to put her in the position of having to lie to protect you. He turned to his daughter, and his expression softened immediately. Sarah, sweetheart, are you okay? Sarah nodded quickly, though tears were now flowing freely down her cheeks. I'm okay, Dad. I can't believe you're here. I came to surprise you, James said gently. I got back a day early. He looked around at the scattered papers and bent to pick up her chemistry textbook. As he straightened up, his eyes fell on the torn homework assignment, and his expression hardened again. How long has this been going on? He asked his daughter, though his eyes remained fixed on the three bullies. Dad, it's okay. It's not a big deal, Sarah said quickly, not wanting to make the situation worse. It's not okay, James said firmly. And it is a big deal. How long? Sarah looked down at her feet. A couple of years, she whispered. The admission hit James like a punch to the gut. 2 years. His daughter had been dealing with this torment for 2 years while he was deployed, unable to protect her. The guilt was overwhelming, but the anger was stronger. He looked back at Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica, and his voice when he spoke was deadly calm. 2 years. For 2 years, you three have been tormenting my daughter. While I was overseas serving this country, while her mother was working double shifts to support our family, you were making Sarah's life miserable. Principal Henderson appeared at the edge of the crowd, having been alerted by a teacher who had seen the gathering. He pushed through the students and stopped short when he saw James in his military uniform. Commander Mitchell, Principal Henderson said, clearly surprised. I didn't expect to see you today. We thought you weren't due back until next week. Change of plans, James said without taking his eyes off the three bullies. I came to pick up my daughter and found her being harassed by these 3 students. Principal Henderson looked around at the scene. The scattered papers, Sarah's tear-stained face, the guilty expressions of Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica, and the crowd of students watching with rapt attention. I see, the principal said carefully. Perhaps we should move this conversation to my office. That's an excellent idea, James agreed. He looked at Tyler. You 3 are going to walk to the principal's office right now. And on the way, you're going to think very carefully about what you want to say when we get there. Tyler looked around desperately, as if hoping for some escape route, but found none. The crowd of students was watching him with a mixture of fascination and secondhand embarrassment. Some of them were clearly enjoying seeing him on the receiving end of intimidation for once. Move, James said, the single word carrying the weight of absolute authority. The 3 bullies began walking toward the principal's office, with James, Sarah, and Principal Henderson following. The crowd of students gradually dispersed, though many continued to whisper excitedly about what they had just witnessed. As they walked, James put a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. Are you really okay? He asked quietly. Sarah leaned into his embrace, feeling safer than she had in months. I am now, she said. But James knew this was far from over. The conversation in the principal's office would be just the beginning. These 3 teenagers had made a serious mistake in targeting his daughter, and they were about to learn that actions have consequences. More importantly, he was going to make sure that Sarah never had to face this kind of treatment alone again. The hallway behind them slowly returned to normal, but the story of what had happened would spread throughout the school like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone would know that Sarah Mitchell's father was not just any military officer, but a Navy SEAL who had just returned from deployment to find his daughter being bullied. And Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica were about to discover what it meant to face the consequences of their actions when they had crossed someone who would not be intimidated, would not be dismissed, and would not allow his child to suffer in silence. The walk to Principal Henderson's office felt like a funeral march for Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica. Their earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing dread as they realized the severity of their situation. Behind them, Commander Mitchell's footsteps echoed with military precision, a constant reminder of the reckoning that awaited them. Principal Henderson unlocked his office door and gestured for everyone to enter. The office was spacious, but felt cramped with 6 people inside. James guided Sarah to one of the chairs in front of the principal's desk, while the 3 bullies stood awkwardly near the door, unsure whether to sit or remain standing. "Please, everyone take a seat," Principal Henderson said, settling behind his desk. Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica reluctantly took the remaining chairs, each trying to sit as far from James as possible. James remained standing behind Sarah's chair, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. His military bearing made him seem even taller in the confined space, and his presence dominated the room. Principal Henderson clasped his hands on his desk and looked around the group. "Commander Mitchell, perhaps you could tell me exactly what you witnessed in the hallway." James's account was precise and thorough, delivered in the clear, factual tone he would use for a military debrief. He described the scene he had encountered, the words he had heard, the obvious distress of his daughter, and the behavior of the 3 students. As he spoke, Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica seemed to shrink further into their chairs. Furthermore, James continued, "When I asked my daughter how long this has been going on, she indicated it's been approximately 2 years. 2 years of systematic harassment and bullying." Principal Henderson's expression grew increasingly grave as he listened. He turned to Sarah. "Sarah, is what your father described accurate?" Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue her father had handed her. "Yes, sir. And this has been happening for 2 years." "Yes, sir. Not every day, but often enough." The principal turned to the 3 bullies. "What do you 3 have to say for yourselves?" Tyler tried to speak first, his voice shaky. "Mr. Henderson, we were just... we didn't think..." "You didn't think what?" James interjected, his voice cutting through Tyler's stammering. "You didn't think she was human? You didn't think she had feelings? You didn't think there would be consequences?" Tyler's face reddened, but he continued. "We were just joking around. We didn't mean to really hurt her." "Joking around," James repeated, his tone making it clear what he thought of that explanation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Let me tell you about my idea of a joke." He scrolled through his photos and found what he was looking for. "This is a picture I took 3 days ago in Afghanistan." He showed the screen to Principal Henderson, then turned it so the 3 bullies could see. The image showed James and his team with a group of Afghan children they had helped rescue from a dangerous situation. The children were smiling, despite having just been through a traumatic experience. "These children," James said, his voice taking on a different quality, "have lived through things you can't imagine. War, violence, loss of family members. And yet when we gave them some candy and a safe place to rest, they smiled. They laughed. They showed more courage and resilience than you 3 have shown in your entire lives." He put his phone away and looked directly at Tyler. "Do you know what we call people who pick on those weaker than them where I come from? We call them cowards. And do you know what we do with cowards?" Tyler swallowed hard, unable to meet James's gaze. "We train them out of that behavior," James continued. "We teach them what honor looks like. We show them what it means to protect those who need protection instead of preying on them." Marcus finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're sorry. We didn't know she was your daughter." James's eyes shifted to Marcus, and his expression grew even more intense. "You're sorry you didn't know she was my daughter? That's what you're sorry about." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus realized his mistake immediately, but didn't know how to fix it. "Let me be very clear about something," James said, leaning forward slightly. "My daughter doesn't deserve protection because she's the daughter of a Navy SEAL. She deserves protection because she's a human being. Every student in this school deserves to come here without fear of being harassed or humiliated." Principal Henderson cleared his throat. "Commander Mitchell is absolutely right. I want to hear from each of you exactly what you've been doing to Sarah, and I want the truth." Over the next 20 minutes, the full scope of the bullying campaign was revealed. It wasn't just occasional teasing, as James had feared. It was a systematic pattern of harassment that included social exclusion, verbal abuse, physical intimidation, and deliberate damage to Sarah's property. Jessica admitted to starting rumors about Sarah's family being poor. Marcus confessed to deliberately tripping Sarah in the cafeteria on multiple occasions. Tyler revealed that he had orchestrated much of the harassment, seeing Sarah as an easy target who wouldn't fight back. As each admission came out, James's anger grew colder and more focused. This wasn't random teenage cruelty. This was calculated and deliberate. His daughter had been selected as a victim and systematically tormented for 2 years. Why? He finally asked when the confessions were complete. Why Sarah? What did she ever do to you? Tyler struggled to answer. She's just different. She doesn't fit in. She gets good grades, and the teachers like her, and that made you angry? James asked. Her academic success bothered you. It's not that, Tyler said quickly. It's just that she acts like she's better than everyone else. Sarah looked up sharply. I never acted like I was better than anyone. You never talk to anyone, Jessica said defensively. You just keep to yourself and act all stuck up. James felt his jaw clench again. So because my daughter is shy and focuses on her studies, you decided she deserved to be tormented? Do you have any idea what her life is like? The 3 bullies looked confused, so James continued. While you've been making her life miserable at school, she's been dealing with having a father deployed in a war zone. She's been watching her mother work double shifts to pay the bills. She's been doing her homework by herself every night, wondering if I'm safe, wondering if I'm coming home. His voice grew softer, but somehow more intense. She's been carrying worries that would break most adults, and instead of finding support at school, she found predators who saw her quiet nature as weakness to exploit. The room fell silent except for the sound of Sarah crying softly. James handed her another tissue and squeezed her shoulder gently. Principal Henderson broke the silence. This behavior is completely unacceptable. Tyler, Marcus, Jessica, you're looking at immediate suspension and a formal disciplinary hearing with your parents present. Sir, Tyler said desperately, please don't call our parents. Can't we just apologize and promise to leave Sarah alone? James laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You want to apologize and promise to leave her alone? Where was that promise 2 years ago? Where was it last month? Where was it an hour ago when I found you cornering her against the lockers? He leaned forward, placing his hands on the principal's desk. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to face the full consequences of your actions. Your parents are going to be called. You're going to be suspended. And then you're going to learn what real accountability looks like. Marcus started crying, which surprised everyone in the room. Please, my parents are going to kill me. They expect me to get into a good college. And if this goes on my record, you should have thought about that before you decided to make my daughter's life hell, James said without sympathy. Actions have consequences. That's a lesson you should have learned years ago. Jessica tried a different approach. Commander Mitchell, sir, we really are sorry. We know we were wrong. Isn't there something we can do to make it right? James studied her for a long moment. You want to make it right? You want to know what making it right looks like? She nodded eagerly. Making it right would have been not doing it in the first place, James said. Making it right would have been stopping when you saw how much you were hurting her. Making it right would have been standing up for her when you saw others picking on her. He straightened up and looked at all 3 of them. But since you did none of those things, now you get to learn about consequences. Principal Henderson addressed the group. I'm calling all your parents to come in for emergency meetings this afternoon. This incident will be thoroughly investigated, and I expect there will be significant disciplinary action. Tyler made one last desperate attempt. What if we write apology letters? What if we do community service? What if we promise to protect Sarah from now on? James turned to his daughter. Sarah, what do you think? Do you believe they're genuinely sorry? Sarah looked at the 3 people who had made her life miserable for 2 years. She saw their fear, their desperation, their sudden concern for consequences. But she didn't see genuine remorse for the pain they had caused her. I think they're sorry they got caught, she said quietly. I think they're sorry they're in trouble. But I don't think they're sorry for what they did to me. Her father nodded approvingly. That's a very mature and insightful observation. He looked back at the three bullies. Here's the thing about apologies. They don't mean anything unless they come from genuine understanding and remorse. What I see from you three is panic about getting in trouble, not regret for hurting another human being. Principal Henderson stood up. I think we've heard enough. Tyler, Marcus, Jessica, you're suspended pending a full investigation. You'll remain in the outer office while I call you parents. Commander Mitchell, I'd like to speak with you and Sarah privately. The three bullies filed out of the office reluctantly, each looking back as if hoping for some last-minute reprieve. None came. When the door closed behind them, Principal Henderson turned to James and Sarah. Commander Mitchell, I owe you and Sarah an apology. Clearly, our systems failed to protect her from this harassment. James remained standing, his protective stance unchanged. Mr. Henderson, I appreciate that, but apologies don't change what happened. What I need to know is what's going to be done to ensure this never happens to Sarah or any other student again. The principal nodded. We'll be conducting a comprehensive review of our anti-bullying policies and procedures. We'll also be implementing additional monitoring and support systems. That's a start, James said. But I also want to know what resources are available for Sarah to help her deal with what she's been through. For the next hour, they discussed counseling resources, academic support to help Sarah catch up on any work that had been affected by the harassment, and strategies for helping her feel safe and supported at school. By the time they finished, Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica's parents had all arrived and were waiting in the outer office. James could hear raised voices through the door as the parents learned what their children had been doing. As James and Sarah prepared to leave, Principal Henderson shook James's hand. Commander Mitchell, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I'm truly sorry it took this long to address. James nodded curtly. See that it doesn't happen again, to Sarah or to anyone else. As they walked out of the office, they passed the three sets of parents who were in heated discussions with their children. James didn't acknowledge them, but he was satisfied to see that the consequences were beginning to unfold. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead as the school and the families involved figured out how to move forward from this incident. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at Lincoln High School, and the changes were remarkable. Sarah Mitchell walked through the same hallways where she had once dreaded every step, but now she held her head high. The fear that had consumed her for 2 years was gradually being replaced by something she had almost forgotten: confidence. The disciplinary hearing had resulted in Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica each receiving 2-week suspensions and mandatory enrollment in a comprehensive anti-bullying program. More importantly, their parents had been horrified to learn what their children had been doing. Tyler's mother, a teacher herself, had broken down in tears during the meeting. Marcus's father, a successful businessman who prided himself on raising respectful children, had grounded his son for 3 months and enrolled him in community service. Jessica's parents had removed all her social media privileges and required her to write detailed apology letters to Sarah and to volunteer at a local children's shelter. But the most significant change wasn't in the consequences faced by the bullies. It was in the transformation of the school's culture and Sarah's own journey of healing and growth. Commander James Mitchell had taken a month of leave to help his daughter transition and to ensure that the school followed through on its promises. During this time, he and Sarah had grown closer than ever before. The secrets and silence that had defined their relationship while he was deployed had been replaced by open communication and mutual understanding. They sat together in their small apartment's living room one evening, Sarah working on her chemistry homework while James read through some of his military reports. The comfortable silence between them was interrupted by Sarah's question. Dad, do you think I'm weak for not standing up to them sooner? James looked up from his papers, his expression thoughtful. Sweetheart, surviving 2 years of systematic harassment while maintaining your grades and your character isn't weakness, it's incredible strength. He set his papers aside and gave her his full attention. Do you know what we teach in military survival training? We teach that the first priority is to survive. The second priority is to escape when possible. Fighting back is only the third option, and only when the first two aren't working. Sarah considered this. So, I was following military survival strategy. In a way, yes. You survived a hostile environment by keeping your head down and focusing on your goals. You tried to escape by avoiding confrontation and changing your routes through school. You only stood up to them when you were cornered and had no other choice. He leaned forward, his voice earnest. Sarah, what those three did to you wasn't your fault. Not for 1 second. And your response to it shows remarkable resilience. This conversation was part of their new routine. Sarah was seeing a counselor twice a week to help process the trauma of the bullying, but these talks with her father were equally important. He was helping her understand that she wasn't a victim, she was a survivor. The changes at school had been equally dramatic. Principal Henderson had implemented a comprehensive anti-bullying program that included peer mediation training, anonymous reporting systems, and regular assemblies about respect and kindness. More importantly, several students had come forward to report other instances of bullying that had previously gone unnoticed. One of the most unexpected developments had been the support Sarah received from her classmates. Many students who had witnessed the bullying but hadn't known how to help had approached her after the incident. They formed an informal support network that made sure she was never isolated during lunch or between classes. Emma Rodriguez, a girl from Sarah's advanced biology class, had become a particularly close friend. I always wanted to talk to you, Emma had confessed during one of their lunch conversations. But Tyler and his friends made it seem like anyone who was nice to you would become a target too. This revelation had been both painful and enlightening for Sarah. She realized that the bullies' power had extended beyond just hurting her directly. They had created a climate of fear that prevented other students from showing kindness. I wish I had been braver, Emma had said. I wish I had stood up for you. You're standing up for me now, Sarah had replied. That's what matters. The friendship with Emma and several other students had opened up a whole new world for Sarah. She discovered that many of her classmates actually admired her academic achievements and her quiet strength. Some had been dealing with their own struggles and found inspiration in her resilience. Tyler, Marcus, and Jessica had returned to school after their suspensions, but they were changed. The consequences they had faced at home and at school had been severe enough to make a real impact. More importantly, the mandatory counseling and community service had begun to give them perspective on the harm they had caused. Tyler's transformation had been particularly notable. His mother's disappointment had affected him deeply, and his required volunteer work at a local veteran center had given him new insight into military service and sacrifice. When he had tried to approach Sarah to apologize in person, she had been hesitant at first. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, Tyler had said during one of their supervised meetings with the school counselor. But I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. Sarah had listened as he explained how his volunteer work had introduced him to veterans who had served with honor and sacrifice. Your dad is a hero, Tyler had said, his voice thick with emotion. And I used that against you. I'm so ashamed of that. The apology had been genuine, but Sarah was cautious about forgiveness. I appreciate that you're sorry, she had said, but it's going to take time for me to trust that this change is real. Tyler had nodded, understanding that forgiveness was something that had to be earned over time, not just requested. Marcus and Jessica had also made efforts to make amends, though their transformation seemed less complete than Tyler's. Marcus had focused on academic excellence as a form of penance, throwing himself into his studies with new intensity. Jessica had begun speaking at anti-bullying assemblies, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. But perhaps the most significant change of all was in Sarah herself. The girl who had once tried to make herself invisible was now volunteering to read announcements over the school's PA system. She had joined the debate team and discovered she had a talent for public speaking. Most importantly, she had found her voice. The thing about being bullied, Sarah had said during one of the school's new peer support meetings, is that it teaches you that your voice doesn't matter. But that's not true. Everyone's voice matters, and Everyone deserves to be heard with respect. Her transformation hadn't happened overnight. There were still days when she felt anxious walking through the hallways. There were still moments when cruel words from the past echoed in her mind. But with the support of her father, her new friends, and her counselor, she was learning to replace those negative voices with positive ones. James watched his daughter's transformation with pride and amazement. The shy, fearful girl he had found cowering against the lockers was becoming a confident young woman who stood up for herself and others. But he also carried guilt about the time he had missed and the suffering he hadn't prevented. "I should have known," he had told Sarah's counselor during one of their family sessions. "I should have seen the signs." "Commander Mitchell," the counselor had replied, "even parents who are home every day sometimes miss the signs of bullying. Your daughter went to great lengths to hide what was happening because she didn't want to worry you or her mother while you were deployed." The counselor had helped him understand that his guilt, while natural, wasn't productive. What mattered now was that he was present and engaged in helping Sarah heal and grow. One evening, as they sat together doing homework, Sarah looked up from her textbook. "Dad, I want to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I'm proud that you're my father. Not just because you're a Navy SEAL, but because of who you are as a person. The way you handled everything at school. You could have just scared them or intimidated them, but you made them face real consequences and think about what they had done." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm proud of you too, Sarah. More proud than you could possibly know." She smiled and returned to her homework, but James continued watching her. This remarkable young woman was his daughter, and despite everything she had been through, she was growing into someone with compassion, strength, and wisdom beyond her years. The bullying incident had been a crisis that revealed serious problems, but it had also been a catalyst for positive change. The school was safer and more supportive for all students. Sarah had found her voice and her confidence. Even the bullies themselves had been forced to confront their behavior and begin the process of becoming better people. As James tucked Sarah into bed that night, something he still did occasionally, making up for lost time, she asked him one more question. "Dad, do you think people can really change?" "I know they can," he said without hesitation. "Look at how much you've changed in just a few weeks. Look at Tyler and how different he is now. People can change when they're willing to face the truth about themselves and do the hard work of becoming better." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I hope Tyler really has changed. Not just because he got in trouble, but because he understands why it was wrong." "That's very generous of you," James said, impressed by his daughter's capacity for forgiveness. "I'm not ready to be friends with him or anything," Sarah clarified. "But I hope he becomes the kind of person who protects other kids instead of hurting them." As James turned off the light and left his daughter's room, he reflected on how much had changed since that day in the school hallway. The crisis had been devastating, but it had also been the beginning of something better for Sarah, for the school, and even for the young people who had caused so much pain. The next morning brought news that would underscore just how far things had come. Principal Henderson called to tell them that Tyler Brooks had reported another student for bullying a younger child and had intervened to stop the harassment himself. "It seems your encounter with Tyler really did make an impact," the principal told James. "He's becoming one of our most reliable students for reporting and preventing bullying incidents." When James shared this news with Sarah, she smiled genuinely for the first time when hearing Tyler's name. "Maybe he really has learned something," she said. "Maybe something good came out of all this after all." James hugged his daughter, marveling at her wisdom and resilience. The girl who had once been cornered by bullies was now someone who could find hope and meaning even in her darkest experiences. She had not just survived. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. As they prepared for another day at school, Sarah walked with confidence, James walked with pride, and Lincoln High School continued its transformation into a place where every student could feel safe, valued, and heard. The bullies had indeed cornered her, not knowing that their actions would awaken not just a Navy SEAL's protective fury,